Next up, we've got Juan. Are you ready to go? He's also been managing the video and everything today. And the slides, let's see. Oh, we already did that. I don't want to do that again.
Okay.
That wasn't that great. I had water in the back of the room. How was your water, Gabe?
It wasn't any good. And I went looking for another drink and it was unsuccessful.
He just wants to get another drink.
That's what happens. I mean, there's a great story on The Simpsons once where Homer went out to an all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant, and they kicked him out because, of course, he was eating buckets and buckets of chum. I cannot believe it is a monster, a sea creature, or beast it be. And then they kicked him out, and later on they were in court, and they were talking about the all-you-can-eat restaurant. They said to Marge, "And what did you do that night after you were kicked out?" "We drove around looking for more all-you-can-eat seafood restaurants. He did not get all-you-can-eat." And then they had the court case, and Homer ended up being their mascot. He could just eat food forever, so it worked really well. It's an early Simpsons. All right, Juan, are you ready, or do you want me to tell another Simpsons story? All right, here is Juan Galt.
All right, so thank you for coming. It's exciting. Looking forward to this conversation. A little nervous. So, security and inheritance in the digital age. We've talked about a lot so far in this conversation. One of the conversations that happened earlier with Castusas was about, well, obviously the potential, but it seems that we're contending with a certain aspect of Bitcoin, which is how to protect it, like, and how to deal with how conflict is going to be resolved going forward, right? One of the memes going around right now is that Bitcoin is inconfiscatable, and this is not a quality that Bitcoin always has. It is a potential that it has. It can be inconfiscatable. But it can be because there is a kind of explosion of possible ways to secure your Bitcoin. And it doesn't mean that it's inherently secure. If you leave your crypto or your Bitcoin in a laptop that's unsecured, or if you leave it in an exchange, it's going to get confiscated, possibly. It's certainly much easier to do so. And so becoming masters of security is actually quite important and valuable, and Bitcoin will reward that. And so this is, I think, a new era of security in the digital age, certainly for the internet, but also a new era of security in general. There's things that we can do now to protect assets that we've never been able to do before, like use what's known as smart contracts to lock value with cryptography in a way that you just can't take it away. You can't break into a vault and so on. The vault is math, and you can't. There's no drill hard enough to break down SHA-256 if it's done correctly, so to speak, right? And so it's very exciting for security, and it's also very. This is the barrier to entry. This is the hero's journey of the Bitcoiner or the Bitcoin user. You need to learn how to protect your coins, and to some degree, you got to learn how to differentiate the true Bitcoin, so to speak, from all the altcoins and all the noise and all the marketing. As just to echo back to one of the earlier discussions today. So I'm Juan Galt. I've been doing research for a while, journalism and so on. I was a journalist for about 3 years in crypto. I started in 2015, and then I did some investment research analysis into the altcoin world. That seems to be kind of like the rite of passage for altcoin and crypto use people and Bitcoin people. You just start with Bitcoin, and you're like, oh my god, I gotta go find the next Bitcoin because I clearly missed out. And then you just go into shitcoin land and then swim there for a while and make your way back to the beach, and sometimes make some money. Like, I've made some money on altcoins, I've lost some money on altcoins. I've learned to think and differentiate the altcoins enough, right? And I think that's part of the cultural sort of journey, you know. I'm doing entrepreneurship. I've been building little businesses my whole life since I was a teenager, and public speaking education and so on. So right now I got 2 companies, phonehuddle.com and beyourownvault.com, which is informing a lot of my thinking lately, and I'm going to sort of share some of what we found in this company with you guys. So what we try to do, just to get a sense of what I'm up to these days and what I'm thinking a lot about, we try to bring together the best practices of online security into one educational suite. So we're trying to there's a lot of things that I've learned and a lot of OGs, so to speak, or crypto users learn that are not codified, that are just kind of like through experience, right? I think it's time to bring that into the next level. So, and one of the other problems that we have is that there's a lot of theoretical attacks, right? So what if, the NSA's after you and they sort of socially engineer your ISP, and then they, right? Like you can come up with like this fantasy grade science fiction movies that are theoretically possible, but practically expensive, and why would anybody care? And so I think in security we found that we want to be pragmatic about it, and we want to find easy to use steps to help people reach meaningful upgrades in security and in their experience of the internet as well. If your experience of the internet becomes so difficult and convoluted and there's so many layers of security that you don't want to use it, then that's not really good. We also test software and hardware wallets and tools to make specific recommendations about what we think is good technology right now. So that's what we're up to. In this journey to try to help bring better security, easy to use security to the public, we've identified 3 primary forms of digital value. Of course, digital finance, which is Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, even like non-fungible assets, which are like memes that are tokenized on the blockchain in their art. One of these memes went traded for $30,000 in New York. It's a meme of a Pepe Simpson meme, and you can own the token version of it, and there's only one, and it's $30,000, right? So digital finance is going to continue to evolve, and so that's very important. We more or less understand that quite well now for this audience. Access to platforms is your access to your banking, online banking. You don't really have a reputation, you just have an access code, access to different platforms of the sort. And then the last would be reputation. Reputation is your name, is your brand. Who are you to the world? Who do they know you as? And do you have control of those channels of communication, right? And this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more, as control over your social media. We're all on Twitter, or most of us are on Twitter. Some of us are big on Twitter. Some of us are even big on other social medias, right? I have friends that are really big on Facebook, Instagram, and so on. If somebody takes over that account, they are taking over your voice. It's a very intrusive thing, and it's a very powerful thing. One of the big scams that have happened is somebody's social media account gets hacked, and with that account, they use the trust that you've built up with your followers and your friends to scam them out of cryptocurrency, right? And that's a very real threat, and it also shows how valuable reputation is. So one of the things we think about is sort of how to secure your access and control over these accounts. And one of the things you want to do, of course, is verify. If anybody reaches out to you, it's like, hey, huge opportunity, quick profit tomorrow, give me my money now, we'll flip it tomorrow, we'll get you 3 times the Bitcoin. This happened with multiple influencers, it's a popular scam. You want to try to find a way to verify them. Call them, talk to them, just drill them about it, and don't immediately trust just because it's coming from the account that you trust, because you're not in front of them. There's a digital interface, and that connection is the internet is kind of under attack today, and it's very interesting how it's happening. Another thing that's going on with reputational sort of fraud and attacks, we're in a weird transition between the analog world where everything was paper authentication and names. You put your name, your social security number, your date of birth, your location. Everything was physical. We're going from the physical age to the digital age, and in this awkward transition, we're still standing. We have one leg on the banking system. We have one leg on the legacy system, and the way that they protect value is by trying to identify you as an individual. And then they're trying to use the internet to make that efficient, which is why they ask you for KYC and AML, and that's why they authenticate sort of your identity through all this information. They're also trying to track you and control what you send and don't send because of politics and all that's involved with government and money laundering and so on. People are trying to do certain things, and they're trying to control your money fundamentally. But the problem with this is that all this data is in servers. And servers are they're kind of hard to secure, and unlike with a Bitcoin wallet or a password, you can't update your KYC. If your identity information gets hacked and leaked, when it happens, because it happens a lot, well, you can't really reset your KYC information, right? So we're going to talk a little more about that. But before we go into some of these topics and more specific things, I want to take a step back and talk about the philosophy of security. Because, again, it's very easy to get very paranoid in an industry that's so young and there's so much potential future value in. And I don't want to, it's not good if we're paralyzed by sort of the fear. And so how do we deal with this problem of security, knowing that, there's all these theoretical attacks? And hopefully, if you're not scared about some of the potential, I'm probably going to scare you today a little bit. But also going to give you some tools and some a mindset, a framework to think about this and go forward. So, quick question. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object? Singularity? Anybody else? Unstoppable force, the Hulk punches the blob. Explosion? Implosion. Okay. We think that...
Back the other way, doesn't it?
Huh?
Starts going back the other way.
Somebody's going to get it away, right? Well, here's the thing. These two things are not... They can't exist in the same universe. It's a contradiction. So the unstoppable cannot live in the same universe as the unmovable. Their characteristics contradict each other. So we either live in a unstoppable universe, a universe with unstoppable forces, or a universe with unmovable forces. And I think the answer is we live in a juggernaut universe, a universe with unstoppable forces. I can always think of a bigger potential threat. Bitcoin is very strong. It's the strongest system I think we've ever thought of. But it still has a very explicit way to break it, and that's 51% of the hashing power used in a malicious way for a long enough period of time. It has an exploit, right? It's just designed to make that really, really difficult and expensive to achieve. And so we live in a juggernaut universe. We don't live in a blob universe, so to speak. That, however, doesn't mean that we can't achieve practical unmovability or practical security. In fact, we've thought about this for a long time. We've come up with very complex and straightforward structures, right? A moat, a castle inside, and your Bitcoin in there, and you got archers over here. There's a lot you can do to protect yourself. It's very effective because our enemies are not, they're not infinite. They're not all powerful, right? I mean, if God wants to take it away, sorry, you're done. But mortals are mortals, and we're all mortals, right? And so you can play these games. That's right. Green is orange. Yes. Yes.
The presentation was orange.
Yeah, and Katie's was pink. So sorry about that. Not sure what that's about. So I think the point of all of this is to say we can think of all these threats, but deal with the biggest ones first and go one at a time. Then don't get overwhelmed. One step at a time. Deal with the biggest ones, the most urgent things first, and you'll have very good odds. So this is just kind of like a little visualization of what I'm talking about, right? This cloud is what you can see, your assumptions and your facts. This is what you understand about the environment. These are things that live in that environment, things that have been identified already and seen and observed. These are hypothetical threats that you probably can't do anything about, at least not yet, right? So meteor hits Earth, Bitcoin's dead. For now, once Elon Musk takes us to Mars, we'll decentralize a little bit more, right? You keep playing that game, right? So yeah. Okay, so let's talk about meat space and cyberspace. This is another one of these sort of great divisions, and it's the same thing I was talking about earlier. Is sort of the physical and the digital, and we're entering the digital age, and that has basically is a category of life and security and discussion on its own. So we're going to talk about these two one at a time, and I want to introduce you to Bob. Bob is he's more of a physical meat space kind of guy. He's not really a cyberspace kind of guy, but he's into Bitcoin a little bit. He's his kids and grandkids are telling him about it. He's like, or friends of friends are telling him about it. So he got on Coinbase, and he has some Bitcoin, some Binance, some others introduced centralized exchange over here. He doesn't have 2FA, doesn't get it, can't be bothered. Trades whatever he's bought, he's got it on Coinbase. He reuses the same password on his Coinbase as his Facebook and his Twitter. He doesn't really have Twitter, let's face it, he's on Facebook. He's got Yahoo Mail or something like that. 0 two-factor authentication there, no PIN codes or anything like that. He doesn't really do much accounting. He figures it'll be, you know, it's all on Coinbase. Why do any accounting of what you're doing? And he just, you know, he'll pay with credit card if he on any website or if his information is floating around. He doesn't care. He lives in physical space. He's not worried about his privacy very much. Bob is sort of the example that we try to kind of think about of a person with zero security that's actually engaged on digital on the internet and Bitcoin and so on. We're trying to help people get to Alice level security. Alice is somebody that has thought about security. They've taken reasonable education and steps to secure themselves. They're not necessarily a ninja in the internet, right? That's more of a Tom kind of person. A Tom is somebody that's secure, but it's also anonymous and private and hidden, right? And they're in the dark, right? Alice is more or less clear net, but much more reinforced. They're living in a castle. You can see the castle, but it's a castle, right? And so that's what we're sort of trying to help people do. And in this journey, we've sort of discovered a variety of assumptions and facts about the environment that we're in today. I want to share with you some of the top 5 assumptions. Personal computers are not secure. These laptops, especially Windows, they're general computers. They're getting better, but they're generally not secure. As far as computing environments, they're the least secure environment to work with. You don't want to leave Bitcoins in there. You don't want to leave crypto in there. You want to put it in hardware wallets, paper wallets, multi-sig if you're looking into that and you're playing at that level. This is the least secure computing environment. They're personal laptops and PCs. Difficult to use tools are not secure from user error. One thing is, the ninja, the bad guy, right? Another thing is your own incompetence or your own mistakes. And as difficult as it can be to sort of recognize that's a major flaw. It's a major failure that has led to a lot of Bitcoin and wealth being lost. And it's because people, A, don't think about it, don't learn about it, and B, they just, people make mistakes, right? And so you definitely don't want to be the one at fault for you losing your Bitcoin, right? And so it's important to use tools that you understand. And if your security tool is too complex, and you don't know how to use it, you may want to, really contemplate that or look for something else. The perfect can be the enemy of the good, right? It's very easy to lock yourself up in a maze and then not be able to find your treasure, right? And it's important not to do that. You're better off with a simple but reasonable system than a very complex and system so secure that you can't get in. Open source software is better than closed source software. So if you're comparing tools, you want to go for open source, and the reason is open source software gets stronger over time because people can look at it and point holes and communicate information to it, and it integrates that data. Whereas closed source systems, they're much more opaque. People don't really see what's in them, and then they have to usually hire private sort of experts to come and look at it, and so they'll have like a kickstart, like a bootstrap, so to speak, just like centralized companies have like extra speed sometimes, but over time they become fragile and slow. And so, with open source, you want to pick software that's like has a lot of engagement in it, but overall, open source is better than closed source software. And digital environments are less secure than meat space. We've been doing meat space conflict and theft and wealth protection for a millennia, right? Since monkeys, animals do it all the time. Dogs are territorial, right? And so on. Like we understand meat space. You just click the window. We understand meat space fairly well, but digital security is something that's relatively new. Can you hold this for a second?
Sure.
Hey, I want to thank Juan for wonderful work he's doing with us. Technically, we'd be completely lost without him.
Yeah.
So really thank you.
All right. Yeah. So digital environments are much less secure than meat space. And we're trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of potential to basically use some of the principles of the physical security to leverage something like the security that's coming from Bitcoin. So when torn between products, I hope these a few assumptions will help you kind of find the right product. Now I'm going to talk about one of these attacks that has been very effective recently. It's called the SIM card hack. So the SIM card system is basically the telephone system, and it's an ancient system, relatively old, and it's been exploited quite incredibly over the past few years. Ever since the internet, basically, people been hacking it. But since the birth of Bitcoin, it's kind of taking a whole new dimension. A lot of money has been stolen using the SIM card hack, and to use some examples, Michael Turpin, a crypto entrepreneur and investor, lost $24 million. Somebody drained his accounts using this SIM card hack. Joby Weeks, a libertarian friend, he lost $50,000 to $100,000 in Bitcoin at the time. And this, people took over his social media account, and then they used the trust that he built with his friends to scam his friends of Bitcoin, and that was something like $50,000 worth of stolen Bitcoin. Jack Dorsey just had his Twitter account hacked for a moment, and the hacker posted quote-unquote racist tweets. I haven't been able to find the source because Twitter took that immediately down, but that they tweeted something that was unsavory, and anyway. So reputational damage, right? Yeah, you could say it's a freedom of what?
Hate speech.
Yes, it was hate speech. Yeah, it was a kind of form of hate speech. Yeah. And so anyway, so that happened, and so that's reputational damage, right? You know, it wasn't his speech, so it's certainly not a good thing, but it was also a troll post probably. Cody Brown, some dude lost $8,000 from Coinbase in 15 minutes. They took over his account and drained his Coinbase quite fast. Selena Gomez lost an Instagram account and then got dick pics leaked of her boyfriend, and anyway, that's another form of value, sort of memories and digital content. So how does this work? What's a SIM card hack? Well, it's the first things you want to do as an attacker, a SIM card hacker, is you want to figure out their phone number, and you want to get their email, or hopefully their primary email. To get the phone number, you get on a WhatsApp group. There's lots of those, and they're all in there, and all you see is the name and the phone number. Quite easy to find somebody's phone number, and which is kind of terrible. Some people have multiple phone numbers, especially for business and business cards and so on. So you want to kind of like hide that a little bit, and then the email, and then you just gotta find the primary email, which is a little bit more difficult. But if you ask them, often they'll maybe give you something. You're gonna have to do some research, and then you want to find out as much information as you can about them. And guess what? We're in the internet age, so you just look them up on Facebook, and then you look them up on Twitter, and then you look them up on LinkedIn, and then you look up their name. There's websites that you can pay $3 to put a name, and they'll scrape every database on the internet they can and bring all that information to you for $30 a month, and include social security numbers, family people. It's pretty bad, and it depends to some degree of where you're sharing that information. They just public or private companies as much as possible for this kind of information. And once they know enough about you, they can start doing things. One of the things they can do is they can lie to your phone provider, your cell phone provider, about and pretend that they're you. And so they can come to them and say, "Hey, I am Pepito Jones. I lost my phone. Can you forward my phone number to my new phone? And here's the new phone." And so they'll be like, "Sure," because telephone companies are trying to please their customers, and social like the customer support people are nice and they're trying to help. What's up?
How can anyone figure out who my mobile phone provider is? All the providers we have.
I mean, how many are there? Like 5? T-Mobile, AT&T.
There's like at least 20 or 30 in the United States.
And 99% of people use either one or another.
Yeah, I mean the distribution is probably like.
I'm using one that probably nobody here has heard of.
Well, that's good. So you're in the much safer sort of area. Most people are on T-Mobile, AT&T,
right.
So on, right? So you go for the easy targets, right? You go for the non-technical ninjas. You don't go for CEOs. You go for public figures that have some money, right? You don't go for the ninjas, right? Because the ninjas are tough to get. So you lie to them, and then you get the phone number forwarded, and then once you have that, you can receive SMS. And now you go to the email, and then you try to change the password. You say, "Hey, I forgot my password. Can I update my password?" Well, if you have, like many people, if you have it set up, and this was like a default practice in the internet for a while, so a lot of people seem to have something like this. you can reset your password on Gmail or Yahoo by getting an SMS to your phone number, right? These accounts will ask you for a phone number, right? I think they're starting to change that because the attacks are sort of escalating, but this has been more or less, just giving you guys a low resolution version of the attack. And so once they receive the code, they can put that in the browser, and Google will be like, okay, well, you authenticated this through your phone number, therefore you must be the right person, so here, change the password. They change the password, they take over your email, they disable SMS recovery, and then they control your account, and now they control your Gmail, right? And Google is a mega corporation, they don't have time to deal with your customer support, so it's gonna be tough. You're gonna have to really escalate this conflict to try to get it back. It's possible. People have gotten their accounts back, but now they have your Gmail. With their Gmail, they can start resetting passwords to all your major accounts, right? Social media, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, you can probably get it through your primary email account. Turns out the internet has been kind of built on top of email. Almost every service that I can think of is ask for an email account, right? Either they want to send you newsletters, so they want to send you a link so that they can verify that the email is active, and then they can reset passwords through email. So the security of your email is actually a huge deal in the internet. And the basic way to not be exposed to email security is to just hold cold storage crypto and just minimize your risk. But there's ways to have more secure email than the mainstream tends to use. And so that's the way that they would attack your wealth and take control. So what do we do? Well, the answer to this is, I think it's time to minimize dependency on phone numbers. Americans are, surprised to me, very dependent on their phone numbers. They have phone numbers that they've had for 10, 20 years, business numbers. They're known for their phone numbers, right? It's almost like part of their identity, it's part of their identifier. And I'm sure that's paid off quite well because it's simple, but it's probably time to start finding ways to minimize this dependency. And there's no clear way to solve this either. I mean, the telcos are centralized and they're massive and they have lots of people working for them, and so social engineering attacks, like as an attacker, there's some of the things that have been alleged is they'll just go and bribe the customer service guys, but I'll give you $500, just forward phone number. And maybe they do, right? And it doesn't matter what policies they put in place unless you can lock it and so on. So this is an ongoing story. And so some of the things you want to take control of all the recovery process. You want to figure out what is the steps to recover the access to your account. If you forget your password, what are all the possible ways to get it back into your email? Because that's one of the things that they're going to attack. That's not like some sort of science fiction virus. It's built into the interface meant to be easy to use. And so you want to take control. You want to figure out what the recovery processes are and really play with them and master them. You want to start with your primary email and then do others, because many people have multiple emails. You want to update your account, your exchange accounts recovery processes. Basically, this is a sort of an important part. Same thing with social media. There's a lot of it's important to kind of understand this. And then avoid SMS recovery at all costs. Replace software that demands a phone number. That's one of the things that we do with Juan Galt is we try to find companies that don't ask for phone numbers, because it's not only is it unnecessary, it's insecure. And I'm going to show you guys an SMS app that is open source and doesn't demand phone numbers. And if you must use a phone number for business, use something like Google Voice or contain it to a device that's separate, that doesn't have your two-factor authentication, and don't use it as a recovery process for your Gmail and so on, or for your email accounts. And at least you'll sort of separate that risk. If they do attack you as a public person, then it's separate. Cool. So I hope you guys aren't too freaked out. It looks like you're all a little freaked out.
Not me.
No, he's a ninja. He's a Tom.
Got AOL.
Yeah, he's got. Nobody even thinks about AOL, so you're probably safe. Okay, so another fun thing is identity theft, and identity is what I've been talking about, right? Your personal information on some database, because that's the way it used to be done, but in paper. Now it's digital, so very easy to leak. If you're doing identity authentication on paper, you're kind of okay, because paper is really hard to transport. It's like try to move books from one country to another. It's like you need a whole new backpack, right? And so So paper is relatively secure for the system, but the digital age makes this really, really easy to move. So 2017, Equifax gets hacked. 140 million people, almost half of America, loses names, social security numbers, credit card numbers, personal documents. And personal documents are like probably images of passports and IDs and stuff like that, right? Devastating. It's devastating. This system is crumbling. It's crumbling as we speak, and there's no hope. I don't see a way that this system is going to continue, this sort of legacy KYC. Like, it's going to continue to leak, and the cause of these kind of hacks is the identity theft. This has been going up for a while, and I want to show you some charts. And with identity theft, there's a lot of things that can happen. So another fun hack, the OPM is a government agency, American agency. 10 to 50% of Americans, all government workers, lost 780 pieces of information each. Biggest hack in government history, including the NSA and Department of Defense agents. They lost identity information, medical history, and much more. That's social security numbers and so on. All the stuff you would tell the government to become a government worker, all that data, gone. People think some accusations that it was Chinese government. I mean, if you're the Chinese government and that's an easy target, why wouldn't you take it over, right?
It's not gone, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's in the dark web. You can probably buy it on the internet. Yeah. And so if you got hit, that information is basically just there for the taking, right? Here's some charts of a number of data breaches and records exposed, 2008 to 2017. Obviously, you'll see it's a growing trend. Cybercrime complaints, also a growing trend. It's going to continue, and it's because we're using biometric or identity information to authenticate into digital services, and that's a broken system. So I'm using the word biometric here in the sense that it's sort of metrics that follow your biological self, so to speak. So where you're born, your voice, your face, your eye color, your age, your date of birth. All these things are kind of accidents of birth, so to speak. And they're using them for authentication, and so that's kind of what I mean by that. You can also call this biometric or ID authentication is imploding. And how do you update your face? You can't.
You have a big night out.
Unless you get some surgery, right? That might help. But other than that, it's like nobody wants to do that, right? And so that's a problem. Okay, so this is probably the scariest thing I'll talk about today. This is called a deep fake voice hack, attack or something like that. It happened recently, September 19th, and a CEO of an energy tech company in Europe was impersonated. No, was socially engineered. Right? Okay, so the attacker used AI software to grab the target's boss, their voice. Let me try it. So. Energy company in the UK has a parent company over it. So the CEO of the energy company receives a call from his boss. This is the CEO of the parent company. And the CEO of the parent company is like, hey, the deal came through with the supplier, send $250,000 to this account, and we'll get it rolling. So he's like, okay, cool. So they talked for a moment, and then for a few minutes, and okay, cool. So he sent $250,000 to the account. Boss calls again, hey, looks like the payment got returned, got bounced back, and you send it again, right? So at this point, the CEO is like, wait, that's weird. And then the parent company boss calls again, is like, hey, can you send another payment of on set amount, maybe $50,000? So at this point, the CEO was like, okay, something's wrong, right? Well, somehow, according to the investigators that are looking at the crime, the first payment did get sent. That was alive by the parent company CEO. The attacker was using, allegedly, AI to replicate the voice of the CEO of the parent company. And some of the quotes in this is like the CEO of that got attacked says that he could hear the intonation of the German boss's voice, like the tone and the rhythm was so similar that he believed it. He received a call from his boss and is like, okay, cool. So AI is good enough now that it can fake people's voices up to that level. And if you want to have a taste of that, go to fakejoerogan.com. Granted, you need a lot of data, or a reasonable amount of data of the person you want to target, because you got to run that through an algorithm. You need computers that are reasonably strong. Allegedly, I'm not exactly sure. But this is now a possibility, and this is going to break down a lot of things in the internet if it becomes popular, and why wouldn't it? And so we're going to need to move to new ways of authenticating people at distance, because AI is not going to stop anytime soon, and this software is around now. And the way is going to be what we think it should have been for a while, I think, and it's going to be cryptography, cryptographic authentication. I think it's maybe the only solution to this. And that means that you create a private key set, and people that are in crypto are already way ahead of the curve, because you're already using Trezor or hard wallets, you already understand cryptography a little bit, so you're ahead of the curve. You guys have a huge advantage by being here and listening to this, because it's not going to be that different than using a hardware wallet to create an identity, a cryptographic identity, and it's going to maybe have like PGP. You might have seen them on Twitter. People that have PGP, it's like 4 letters and 4 letters and 4 letters and 4 letters, and that's like sort of a unique ID. It's called a fingerprint, a PGP fingerprint. We're going to come up with something like that. That's going to have to happen, something like that, and that's how you're going to verify. And there's going to be some cryptographic stuff. So understanding the basics of cryptography is going to be very, very useful in the coming years. And if you take a few hours and go reading basics of cryptography, you'll understand that it's not that complex, right? I mean, obviously there's some serious math, but conceptually you can understand that the difference between a hash, what is symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, and so on. You can get the basics, and it'll be a huge, very meaningful upgrade in your security. So that's it. That's kind of what's coming. I'm going to give you guys a specific recommendation here. This two-factor authentication is ubiquitous in the crypto space today. You want to have 2FA for everything, and that's a good idea. Why do we use 2FA? One of the reasons we use 2FA is to protect you from stolen passwords. So if you're reusing passwords, let's say from social network A to exchange B, and social network A gets hacked, then they can try to use that password with other services, and they might try exchange B. And so your password basically just got hacked without getting hacked, if you know what I mean. So two-factor authentication protects you from that, because you need something else, something that's unique and different and separate. It protects you from something called keyloggers. Keylogger is sort of a special kind of malware that tries to log keystrokes on your computer. If you have an up-to-date sort of Windows machine and you have an antivirus and it's up-to-date, then it'll catch sort of most of these. In general, it'll catch these. But even if you have one of these, if you're using two-factor authentication, that you'll be reasonably secure from this, right? Assuming your 2FA is, nothing out of the ordinary. If the NSA is after you, there's probably not a whole lot you can do other than like sort of cold storage and so on. But like low-level attackers won't. This will protect you a good amount. And physical access, right? So somebody like gets access to your laptop. Maybe you're already logged. Maybe you have auto login in your browser, right? Well, it's going to ask for a two-factor authentication, and they don't have your device, so they can't get in. They could get into your Gmail maybe, but you can also set up two-factor authentication in your Gmail or your email, and so it protects you from a few of these things. Some of the downsides is it's not meant to have backups. It wasn't designed to have backups. It was designed to be lost, and if lost, then disabled and re-enabled. And it can be disabled via user email. So if your email gets taken over, you're in trouble. Your primary email anyway, or whatever you're using to recover your accounts. And so it's kind of as secure as your email is. So we've looked at a bunch of two-factor authentication apps. Google Authentication, Auth are very popular. But we think they're kind of not that great. There's better alternatives. Another one that's around is LastPass Authenticator. People that use password managers might know this one. I like it. It's kind of pretty simple and straightforward, but it's not great because it's not open source. So there's 2 open source 2FA apps you can use right now, and OTPs for Android, and someone called Authenticator for iOS, and they're both open source. They both allow encrypted backups. The reason that backups are kind of used in two-factor authentication is that if you lose your device, if you're like me or if you're active in crypto, you probably have 30, 50 two-factor authentication codes in your app. If you lose the device, to reestablish that is a nightmare, right? It's a nightmare. You have to go through every single site and do the thing again. It'll take you a few hours, easy. And so that's why people came up with backups. Well, this allows you to do an encrypted local backup. It doesn't go to the cloud. And it's not bad. I mean, if you're gonna do backup, this is probably the way you want to go, with some sort of encryption and so on. Preferably decent encryption, but even a little bit of encryption will probably help. Though the better. But anyway, these 2 apps are good. They're kind of the best that I've found. And the Android one has a PIN number. The iOS one does not. So yeah, maybe check that out if you're into 2FA. You might want to kind of look at these and think about how to deal with that. There's other ways to like sort of protect your 2FA. One of the problems with 2FA, for example, with Authy, is Authy asks you for a phone number, and then you can do a phone number SIM card hack on an Authy account, and then take over those two-factor authentication, which is pretty bad. And so you want to definitely look into that and solve that. And I think something like that can be done with Google Authenticator as well, but I'm not exactly sure at this moment if they fixed that. Yeah, so these are some of the features. They also have like an exotic sort of emergency switch. So it's like, I guess you push a special button and it deletes the data. That's cool. So it's a very cool app. I like this 2FA app. It's open source and everything. And it does whatever you expect 2FA to do. Definitely supports all of that. I think the future of two-factor authentication is going to be something like this. It's going to be hardware wallets. Trezor is very good hardware wallet. There's other wallets, Ledger, Nano, and so on. There's a few other ones coming on board, and they're what they do is they're special computers that take away the password from these general computers, and they're designed to protect data. They're not designed to share and copy, paste, and reproduce and edit and so on. They're specifically protection hardware, and I think in the future we're going to be doing authentication through devices like this or multiple devices like this. And already you can do two-factor authentication on many websites with Trezor using a protocol that's called U2F, Universal Two-Factor Authentication. So maybe look into that a little bit, and that's something that we're experimenting with. It's not really ready for mainstream play yet. It's still sort of being adopted, but this is where things are going to go. If you're already at a place where you're like, okay, I definitely got to go into hardware security, you want to use YubiKey. YubiKey is kind of a standard, and it's a hardware sort of based authentication. Gonna have to do some learning there, but it's pretty good. And last thing we would recommend, well, this is kind of like a short presentation of a lot of the stuff that we're doing, so there's a lot more to talk about, but test your recovery processes. As I mentioned earlier, what happens if you lose two-factor your 2FA device? What do you got to do to get back in, to restabilize your fort, so to speak, right? To re-stabilize your boat. What happens if you lose your laptop? What happens if you lose your backups? What happens if you lose your hardware wallet? What if you forget your PIN or your password to your laptop or your computer or your phone? You want to test these. You want to understand what the road back in is, right? Because maybe you're going to have to walk this road at some point, and you don't want to have too many surprises. You want to more or less understand what the way back in is, and maybe you'll find some holes that you can plug, And that's a lot of what we do in Bigger Involved. We have a map, and we really test a lot of these things and sort of make some recommendations. So if you were going to take 5 things away from this conversation, this speech, which I know is a little bit long, is practice and recovery from loss and act fast. If you lose your device, top priority, go figure out how to restabilize your fort. This is not something to do later. You want to get on this. The same with backups and lost computers and so on, because we're talking about digital money now. We're talking about real money, right? So HODL or cryptos offline. Yeah, if you're not a trader, move the money offline. Put it on hardware wallets, do multi-sig, do backups, take it outside of the computer as much as you can, unless you're playing with it actively, and then you gotta really think about how you're managing the risk. Double check crypto public addresses before you send. This is kind of like an old recommendation, but it's still very important. Make sure it's the same address. And also, there's a speech by Jeremy Welch at Casa HODL. They just did in Latvia, where he talked a little bit about this, interesting new insights on this. Maybe keep an eye on that, or go watch it. I retweeted it. Use two-factor authentication on all exchanges and wallets that allow it, and avoid SMS phone numbers recovery at all costs. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about meat space. Phone loss hurts. People are twice more likely to lose their phone than have it stolen. Fun fact. The amount of people that, this is usually the age group, so people that lose their phones, 45% are, I guess you can't see, but basically 18 to 25, up to 30 and so on. Here's 35 to 40 or something like that. And then the older they get, they usually the less lose their phones. The reason I'm talking about this is that Phones are kind of really important, right? Like we're basically attached to our phones now. You know, they're devices that cost $250 to $600, $700, $1,000. They have all this information, right? They have their two-factor authentication. They have a bunch of data. They have pictures of you, videos, things that maybe you haven't backed up. And if you lose them, not only do you lose the device, and thus you lose your original investment, you gotta buy a new one, but you also lose the data, you lose contacts, right? And that's your ability to reach people and leverage your relationships and leverage your trust in your brand. And now you're kind of exposed a little bit, because what if the thief is not just a lazy thief? What if they're a little more sophisticated? What if they're trying to start to bury or dig into there? What if you have Bitcoin wallets in there, right? So phones are actually kind of really important. We're merging with technology in some ways. I know it's a little bit uncomfortable to think about, but we're kind of merging. And I don't see that stopping. You know, there's probably some ways we can be healthier around this, but we are merging. So phones are the number one most forgotten item, according to the Uber lost and found item. These are items that people forget in Ubers, right? Number one item are phones. And people are willing to pay up to $1,000 above the price of their device to get it back. So usually they'll call, and if they can reach somebody, they'll offer a bounty, they'll send SMS. This is how much the data is worth. Your personal data in the phone, this is what people are up to, how much people are willing to pay, according to 500 Americans that lost the survey from 2014. So who knows where it is right now? It could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. There's some software that helps track your device, right? So if you lose your phone, there's software you can install, and Apple already has some of this built in that'll track your phone. But as a thief, you just turn it off, or you take the SIM card off, and that's that. There goes the SMS. There goes the some of the basically tracking abilities. If it's off, those services can't reach it, can't ping it and figure out where it is. And so some of the consequences to crypto users to losing a device, your 2FA codes are lost. That's a few hours. Wallet apps that are not backed up will be lost. So if you don't have your backups in order, then you lose your money. All the wallets that were maybe you might have had on your phone now need to be recovered, and the recovery of that means you gotta pull out your seed and type it into your phone, or at least some degree input it into the phone, which means now that seed is less secure than it was before. So you probably have to create new accounts, right, and set up new passphrases. So that's a few more hours maybe, or at least an hour, depending on how many wallets you have on your phone. And these are sort of some places that people have lose their phones, top of their car, in a cab, and so on. So to help sort of people not lose their phones, I came up with a crazy invention called the phone huddle, and it huddles your phone. And so this has actually saved my phone so many times. It'll cushion the blow, so it's less likely to break. And if you get up, if you're in a car, you get up, it'll just kind of pull it, and you'll be like, oh my god, and then you'll grab it. So it actually trains you to not lose your phone. It has a little thing, you can grab it, right? Just got more grip, right? So this is just me kind of trying to solve this, and also embracing the fact that we're basically androids. You know, one day we'll just have a tail, and it'll just kind of hold the. I look forward to that day.
That's awesome.
I'll be a monkey. All right, so another aspect of security, another thing that's kind of useful in the meat space world. Trezor just announced something called Shamir Backup, something that everybody should be aware of. If you're into hardware wallets, if you have a Trezor, Shamir Backup is a big deal. It's an old protocol that cryptography ninjas came up with a while ago, but now it's been implemented into the backup of Trezor. And what it is you have right now, if you're using Trezor, most hardware wallets, or most crypto wallets, you have 24 words in paper somewhere, stashed somewhere. Maybe they're engraved in steel, maybe they're written in a notebook, maybe you've done something different with them. What Shamir is it grabs those 24 words and it lets you play with the way that you store them, and it lets you build the redundancy. Redundancy is something that, it's a technical term for managing risk in security. So one of the things you can do, for example, is you can slice, with this protocol, you can slice up your seed into 3 pieces, and if you lose one piece, the other 2 will have all the information necessary to recreate the seed. If you currently use the normal seed, a non-Shamir backup, and you cut it into 3 pieces and you store them in different places, if you lose one, you lost 30% of that data, and now you don't know what it is. And if it gets stolen, then now somebody has 30% of your backup. So that's not the right way to do it. Redundancy means that the words are spread around and duplicated enough that 2 out of 3 can get you back in. And that's what Shamir allows. And it's sort of more advanced sort of math, but it's not terribly complicated. So you wanna play with this. This is really cool. This is a big deal. You can do up to 16 fragments. So 16 of 16 or 8 of 16. So you can play with that a lot. Some of the kind of, generally you want to keep it more simple. So some of the crypto industry over time has kind of settled around these kind of combinations when it comes to multi-factor authentication and so on. 2 out of 3 shares is pretty good. 3 out of 5 shares is better, especially for higher value amounts. And 4 of 6 is also popular. So these are kind of pretty good combinations. This is only available with Trezor Model T right now because the interface, you have to kind of like, there's more buttons to push than what the Trezor 1 allows, so you might have to upgrade to Trezor Model T. This makes it worth it in my opinion. Yeah, so that's really exciting to me. Advantages, lets you decentralize yourself. So we talk about, decentralize all the things. Well, we maybe need to decentralize ourselves a little bit more, right? One of the things that Bitcoin does that's really awesome is that it's a really simple protocol in some ways. I mean, it's beautifully complex and synchronicitous in its own way. Like it's like an orchestra of systems. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also relatively simple, right? It does one thing. It sends value, and that's it. And it gets there, and it stores it. And from a user perspective, it's very simple. And that's good and bad. It's good because you know very well what to expect. It's bad because you have to make some decisions, right? So what Bitcoin does is it moves the complexity and the computational power needed to make good decisions. It moves it to the edges. Instead of being a bank deciding what's a good transaction, what's a bad transaction, as we're used to in the modern day, it moves the decision to you. You are responsible for what's good or bad, and that's great. That's empowering, right? But it's it takes a little bit of thinking, and so part of that is it centralizes control. It centralizes power at the edges, at the individual level, not at the network, but at the user level. And so as you gain more crypto wealth, you're becoming more sovereign, more free, more powerful, but also kind of centralized, right? You have all the Bitcoin. Nobody else has all the Bitcoin. You have the Bitcoin. And so we can decentralize ourselves through something like Shamir Backup and through something like Multisig, such that you don't at any moment have 100% immediate control over all your wealth. You want to distribute that a little bit, right? You want to say, well, I don't have access to all my Bitcoin. It's 2 out of 3 pieces, and you want to take off some of that control, maybe for a long-term hodl, and have some money in your pocket or whatever. Anyway, this is the future of, I think, security, and there's going to be a lot more innovation in this area. It's definitely still early, and people that are looking at this are already way ahead of the curve. It also protects you from things like natural disasters and physical theft because of that reason, because you don't have all that money in your pocket at the moment, right? Natural disasters, if there's if your, God forbid, your house burns down and your backups are in there, right? You want to have more redundancy around that. So okay, I'll finish with this. Simple steps towards inheritance. So it simplifies this. Doing multi-sig and distributed storage and distributed backups helps you solve inheritance, and so some of the problems around doing inheritance in crypto. I'll talk about that more in a second. Inheritance in crypto is a very fun problem. So a company that's doing really great work in terms of long-term hodl and very easy to use, secure hodl is Casa hodl. They're really great. They're expanding very fast. They're doing very good work. Their prices are getting lower and lower. I've talked about them a few times before. I'm not getting paid for talking about them right now or anything like that. And so I recommend looking into them. They have very good customer support. Allegedly, I haven't tested them, but they're getting very cheap. This used to be worth $10,000 a year. Now it's $500, $420. So it's a huge. They're growing fast. They're expanding faster. I think they're going to dominate the market, the long-term sort of hodl market. Crypto inheritance. Okay, let's talk about crypto inheritance. So if you're in Bitcoin, you have a very unique opportunity. You are much more likely than probably anybody else in the next 100 years to become mega wealthy and to become some of the major, your last name might become one of the names that people talk about in conspiracy sort of circles, like, oh my God, those are the Rockefellers, right? like those guys, yeah, they've probably done some bad shit. Like I'm sure that I've heard terrible things, right? But they're also very, very influential because they were early and they made the right moves and they had a lot of opportunities to do good and bad things. And a lot of us are in a similar place, and they managed that because they kept the money in the family and because they invested it well and because they probably raised their kids to play the game and taught them how to play the game. We have a similar opportunity. There's a new game, and those that do this right will maybe become the families, the big families of the future, but that means that we have to figure out inheritance, and that's not an easy problem in crypto. Some of the dilemmas that you have in crypto is if you're the only one that has access to your crypto, then if you die, nobody else has access to your crypto. You are the only one that has the access to your crypto. So this is a problem, right? It's that we all have a particular maze in our head, or a particular sort of, we have a treasure map in our head about where our treasure is. And if we don't, if we're the only ones with the treasure map, the treasure is lost without us. And even if our close sort of friends and family, our loved ones, might not be able to figure out what the treasure map is, if you don't give them some clues, if you don't write down enough about the treasure map, the treasure might be lost. And assuming that they'll be able to figure it out is somewhat of a mistake because we're nerds. Like everybody here is a nerd. Everybody here is at the edges of this industry, at the beginning of this industry, and your family or loved ones might not be so inclined or so intellectually curious necessarily or interested, and so this might be a little bit further away from them than you think. So yeah, that's a dilemma. And another problem is that even if you came up with like a special smart contract or a solution that does let you transmit the Bitcoin to your family and loved ones, that doesn't mean that the law thinks that you did it right. The law might think, well, I don't care who or how you transmitted the data or the money. In our jurisdiction, the next child in line is the one that gets the money, and we get the slice, right? And that creates a conflict. So if you die or something happens to you, now your family not only has to rescue your crypto from your treasure map, but also has to deal with the legal leftover. And so this is something to think about aligning the legal side of things with the crypto management. And the cool thing about law, at least, the good news anyway, is that you can choose your own jurisdiction in general. So if you think about this proactively, you can choose which jurisdiction and how you want to deal with the legal side of things. And that basically means just writing a legally binding will and going to an attorney in the jurisdiction that you want and setting that up, making sure that's the case. Yeah. So another problem with inheritance, and this is not just in crypto in general, is families will fight about inheritance if a clear will isn't written, and that's not something that you want to put on your family, right? That's not really a choice you want to give them. You wanna make your will clear and then have it be settled, because money does tempt some of the bad parts of humanity, right? And hopefully people are nice and stuff, and people certainly can be, but this can be a problem. And there's been some nasty stories around inheritance, not in crypto specifically, but in general. Okay. And the way to solve this in general is to have clear accounting and a clear legally binding will. So you want to keep accounting somewhere. Doesn't mean that you have to put it on publicly, right? But you want to have good accounting somewhere. And that's what the map to your treasure is basically. So knowing what it is, and then to some degree, maybe in a separate system or something like that, knowing how to get to it. I'm not going to give you guys like a clear-cut one-answer solution to inheritance, because I don't know that answer. Inheritance in crypto is very complex. It's a new problem. It's a very interesting problem. It's a problem that I'm very interested in. But it's definitely a problem that is in its infancy, and solutions that are in its infancy. I think things like Shamir are the way forward, and Casa Horror is leading the way on these kind of things as well. So, those that find good solutions to this may end up building dynasties. And that's kind of cool if that's what you're into. But it'll definitely require some study. So to learn more about this, there's a lady called Pamela Morgan, and she wrote an excellent book called Crypto Asset Inheritance Planning. Best book in the industry, in the market that I've read and that I've seen. highly recommended. Highly recommended in general. You'll learn a lot about protecting crypto and a lot about dealing with crypto problems with this book. She's very pragmatic and very sort of old-fashioned, and those old-fashioned solutions work. And so you definitely want to get this book. It's the best thing right now. Maybe there'll be other solutions out there. We certainly have a solution. We have somewhat of a solution to this, specifically the transfer of the crypto. We have a technical solution that works. It gets the first step into it, but you have to do a lot of research. You have to think about this problem well. So this is something that we're dealing with in Be Your Own Vault. Some of the most common mistakes and beliefs in crypto are that you have to hire a lawyer. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You just want to start with accounting and then later on think about hiring a lawyer. You can write a will now and then hire a lawyer to check it. You don't have to hire a lawyer. The first step is not hire a lawyer. The first step is document your will and do accounting. You don't have to trust a third party. That's also a mistake. You can do this in a completely sovereign way. You can do inheritance in a completely sovereign way. You just have to learn about it. Planning will make my assets easy to steal. Planning will, this is somewhat of a tricky aspect. It may lower your security a little bit, but it'll maybe also help you find your assets if you don't know where they are, if you don't do accounting properly. I think this is probably the thing that kind of has concerned me or sort of bothered me the most about inheritance, and this is one of the big challenges. If there's a particular path, a map to your treasure, and there's 2 copies of the map to your treasure, that's not great, right? But a map to your treasure doesn't have to be the key to the treasure chest, right? So you can say, well, my treasure is in that castle over there, and have that be written paper in a secret, right? And then the castle be guarded by dogs and other monsters that can protect it, right, so to speak. So there's ways to deal with this, and I think that's the way forward. Something we think about a lot. The value of your crypto is too low. That may be the truth right now, but give it a year or 2, it might quadruple, right? In 5 years, it'll 10-duple, 20-duple, right? So this is not a good enough excuse. And if you're doing this in a rush, you might get it wrong. So you want to take your time with this. My heirs will figure it out. Maybe they won't. They probably won't, unless you really teach them. Unless you really teach them. And kids are really learning this stuff, so maybe they'll be smarter, but you gotta give them some time. Also, you need a smart contract. No, you don't. There might be some smart contract great solutions that come in the future, but they're certainly not out there yet. So your treasure map might want to contain things like contact information to your lawyer, trusted nerds, people that are nerds that you trust. That's useful. Multi-sig third-party key service. Maybe you're doing some sort of multi-sig thing like with Casa, or there's a few other options out there. Legally binding will, very, very important. Make sure you check it with a good lawyer, or with a lawyer anyway, that's sort of a real lawyer. I don't know much about lawyers. Letter to loved ones, and directions to this is the map to your treasure. This is actually a letter to loved ones, something that Pamela Morgan wrote to kind of help sort of educate about this. So you want to Google this, letter to loved ones. You'll get a sense of where she goes with this. Here's an example of what a treasure map might look like. So devices, smartphone, hardware wallet, exchange account, paper wallet, mnemonic seed, physical coin. This is just listing the device, not the data itself, not the seed itself. PIN codes. So PIN codes are sort of layer 1 of defense. So she suggests doing PIN codes on this particular treasure map, which is sort of private, but maybe it's in your office or something like that. Passwords to password manager and so on. This is kind of like an image from her book. Backup, where the sort of documents are and so on. Backup 1, backup 2, seeds and stuff. So this is kind of what she's talking about, and this is to some degree out of context, so you definitely want to go and read the chapter itself so you understand the reasoning behind every piece of data here. All right. And this is one of the treasure maps we've come up with. So assets, this is a kind of an accounting sheet, right? It shows you which exchange or wallet they're in. You get access to this if you buy the Be Your Own Vault sort of workshop, and it basically tells you where things are, and it gives you charts that let you understand the distribution of wealth in different wallets and so on. So maybe that's useful, and it's kind of like the one of the things we're working towards in the treasure map. We're also working with a guy called Tim Picot, He's a certified financial planner, and he specializes on self-directed IRAs and crypto IRAs in the United States. He's also very experienced with estate planning, and so he's helping Bitcoiners figure out their estate planning, and he's very good with trusts and sort of legal structures that can layer into crypto. So I help people with OPSEC training and understanding security around crypto, and he's sort of taken over the legal side of things. And he also helps with tax optimization and so on. So these are all very, very useful things, and it's good to work with him. All right, so thanks everybody. If you have any questions, I'll take them, and you can find me at biggerandval.com, phonehuddle.com for the phone gadget, and juangal.com for my social media work and journalism work.
What's your phone number?
All right, thanks Juan. I especially like the part about a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget that. They just keep waiting for that perfect plan or the perfect sell, or I'm going to write my will just when I get to that number, or I'm going to write that will next week. So that was really good. And I also liked, we were talking about fallacies and security, and there's a great quote from the movie Heist where he says, "I try to think of what someone smarter than me would do, and then I do that." So we should all try that.